everyone, and welcome back to Knot Weave Stitch. My name is Gisela, and this week we're going to be looking at setting up your craft space and storage solutions. So whether you're starting your craft up as a hobby or as a small business, the first thing you really want to think about is the space. So the space you have available in your home. So that might be an office, a small office space, a studio, maybe even a garden shed or office space outside as well. So you would really need to start thinking about how much space you have available and how we can effectively use that for your specific craft. And closely following on to this, you also want to think about what craft do you want to get into, or it might be several crafts. It might just be one specific craft, or it might be several. So this links back to last week's episode where we looked at how to choose your first fibre craft. So if you haven't listened to that one yet, I would highly recommend having a little listen to that. You really want to think about how you're going to use your space with the craft or crafts that you want to do. It may also be very much a process. When I first started crafting, I was working from a one-bedroom flat. I was working on a desk in the living room to an open kitchen right next to the TV. So I was working in a very small space. In terms of storage at the time, I think I only had a cube storage unit with 4 sections to it, so only kind of 4 little sections that I could use with my storage. So I was very cramped and it wasn't ideal, but you really have to start thinking quite savvy if you're working in small places, how you can use that space and storage really effectively. And obviously I count myself very lucky that we were able to move to a house where I now have basically a room, an entire room that I can use as my studio / craft room space, which gives me a lot more storage and a lot more space to be able to really customize it to what I need to do. But doing craft either as a hobby or as a small business, you can still very much use a small space effectively. It's just kind of thinking it through and potentially growing and changing it over time to make it as effective as possible. I'll also pop a picture onto the blog on my website so you can see what I was originally working with, and then I will also insert another picture as well, what I have currently got with my setup. So you can see how it has evolved over time and how I started off and how that grew. So that might give some inspiration and can help people, but you can do it in a small space. You don't need that space, because I know we don't. We all have our own situations, and financially it is quite difficult at the moment to even be able to afford your own place or afford a house. So I can completely understand that some people have a much smaller space to work with, which I did as well to start off, but you can use that effectively. So we'll be talking about really clever storage solutions and my tips, especially for fibre arts, how you can really maximise that space. Usually when you're setting up a craft room, the first 2 main things that you need to think about is your desk or table space that you're going to be working at, and also your storage as well. So it's very much about looking at the space and the layout of your room and trying to find your setup that really works for you. For me, like I said, I started off with just a normal kind of office desk in the flat, but that really didn't allow me to do what I needed to do, because I was not only doing the crafts, but I was teaching them as well. So I needed a much bigger space to be able to show what I was doing both on camera, and then being able to have a little setup space where I could pop the crafts that I was in the middle of the make of and not have to constantly pack it away, because it got to a point where I was teaching and I was doing my crafts just on a small desk, and obviously it would then migrate to everything being on the floor. It got very, very messy. It was probably the most irritating thing, that with crafts you just want to be able to leave it out halfway through. You know, it's not a full process most of the time. You kind of start and stop and come back to it later on. So for me, I got quite frustrated that later on in the evening I had left everything out and it looked very, very messy, and I'd have to sit there while I was watching TV and I could just see the mess out of the corner of my eye. So it wasn't ideal. So Even in the flat, I then looked at the space and tried to think really hard about how I could make that work for me and how I could be a little bit more savvy with the desk space. So for myself, did a lot of Googling and I couldn't really find a desk setup that worked for me. I needed quite a large table to be able to do it, and because I was working in the corner of the room, I thought an L shape would be fantastic, but a lot of the time the L-shaped desks were very, very chunky. They were way too big and they really didn't fit the area that I wanted. So one of my top tips is actually to set up your own table or create your own desk. That's something that I had to look at. So I had a little search on IKEA's website and found that they had different size tables, and you can actually get the parts to be able to join the tables together, and you could have a play around with how many legs you wanted as well, because that was another thing. If I was having an L-shaped setup, that I wanted to be able to move my legs around underneath and not constantly be hitting one of the table legs. So that was something that I wanted to have a look at. It may also even be the case if you have someone who's quite handy with DIY in the family, they could make a table and get some table legs to be able to join those up together to make a kind of custom made desk space for you, if you're lucky to have someone like that in your family. But for myself, like I said, the IKEA tables gave me a lot more of a range that I could play around with. The tables weren't quite as bulky, and then I could make my L-shaped desk space, which really worked quite nicely for the flat. And with that desk space now, since we've moved house, I still have the L shape, but I've actually added an additional piece to it. So I've got another table attached. So it's much more of a U shape now that I have in my room, because I needed a little bit more space now to be able to do my business, to do my teaching, and also to craft as well. So kind of 3 tables to do 3 separate things, because I think it's quite important actually to have your zones and make sure that they're very clear, especially if you are doing a small business or if you're doing several different crafts. It's good to have their own little zones there so things don't start getting very messy and muddled up. You know where to find all of your bits and pieces and which area to kind of work in as you go along. And depending on your craft, they now have the standing desks, the standing tables. So if you want that as an option as well, you can get them as manual or electric. So that's maybe something to take a look at as well. Really depends on your craft, but that might be something that might be quite nice if you wanted the option to both stand and sit as well. And I know desk spaces can be quite expensive. When you have a little look online, some of them are very expensive. So you could be quite savvy in thinking of where you could get them from. It might be worth having a look at things like Facebook Marketplace, or having a look at charity shops potentially, seeing if they've got any furniture in there which you can use, which should be far cheaper than getting a brand new one. Or like I said, kind of building your own, if you've got those DIY skills, can make it a lot cheaper as well. So the next biggie is the storage. So that was a massive thing for me, because teaching workshops, I have to do lots of different crafts, so I need a lot of storage for all the different crafts. And obviously with my own small business as well, I wanted to make sure that I've got enough storage to be able to cater to the kind of fibre arts that I do. So storage is a massive thing when you're setting up your craft space. So you really need to think about what is the craft or crafts that I'm wanting to do and what kind of storage would work best. So everyone will have their own personal preference in terms of their storage spacing. You can have just large shelving units where you could pop storage boxes on there, or you can have the cube storage. You might prefer to have drawers. There's lots of different options that you can think of. In terms for myself, I love cube storage units. I think they're really effective because you can get all sorts of different dividers and inserts that you can pop into your storage. So for me, So like I said, for myself, I started off with a cube storage unit, which was just 4 cubes in a kind of vertical stand there. And I had 4 fabric drawers for them, which was quite a nice way to keep everything quite tidy. I didn't see any mess inside the drawers there, so I could kind of hide it away and it kept it really nice and neat. I've now very much added to it. I now have 2 units of 4 drawers, so it looks more like a kind of square cube unit with 4 drawers in them. And I have 2 of those, and then I have a unit with 2 cube storage as well. And the majority of it now is in a corner, as I have a little kind of alcove section in the room. So I've pretty much put most of the storage in the corner. Also, sorry if you can hear my dog. He insists on being in the same room today and he's panting away. So if you do hear that, just ignore him. But yeah, I've really built up that cube storage. And like I said, I really like it because you can pop different things into it. So you can pop dividers. I like to have those diagonal kind of cross X dividers, because then I can put in all of my cords and my yarns in there. I love to colour coordinate, so I've got them in all my rainbow colours there. Each colour has its own section, so I like to use those little X dividers to be able to pop all of my cords and yarns in. And I would highly recommend that if you are doing any fibre arts that includes your cords and yarns. So for me, my macrame and my loom weaving in particular, I like to use those little X dividers to help store all of that in there. And then in my other cube storage units, I also have dividers that are like little shelves. So it's basically a little shelf divider that splits that little square into 2. So if I wanted to store more little things in there, I've kind of split that cube into half, so that can store more smaller bits and pieces in there. And I like to do that for my loom weaving. So for the kind of bases, the wreaths, I like to pop that in half of it, and then in the other half I have some of my spare lap looms, my tabletop looms that I like to pop in there as well. So that's a great way to store a little bit more as well, because I find sometimes when you have these cube units, if you pop everything just at the bottom, you have so much empty space with the other half of it. So I think that divider really helps with that. And then, like I said, I have those drawers as well, which is a really great way to just keep everything looking quite tidy. You can't see the mess. I find it can be difficult sometimes to work when the room is messy, so having drawers like that can keep it nice and tidy and kind of hidden away. So you can get them in different types, you can get them in fabric ones like I've got there as well, but that might be something that can be quite useful in terms of storage. Another type of storage that I'm obsessed with are pegboards. I think they are so useful because we only have a kind of limited amount that you can pop in terms of furniture. But the pegboards then take advantage of your wall space as well. So when I was living in the flat, I had 2 pegboards just overhanging my desk space, and they are fantastic. If you need to quickly grab a tool there, you've got that hanging up, so that can be really quite useful. So I like to pop not only my stationery on there, but any excess ribbons and yarns I like to hang up on my pegboard. So that's really useful, and particularly now they have so many different add-ons, and it really depends on your craft and what you want to get out of your storage. So they have little shelves. There is all sorts of different types of hooks and wires that you can get, little containers, all sorts of different things. So pegboards are really great because you can customize them, you can add more to them to make them much larger, and like I said, you can always find lots of different add-ons that will be really tailored to you and your craft. So I'd highly recommend looking at pegboards, and you can get them in loads of places now. Again, I love good old IKEA. That's where I get a lot of my stuff from, so I got myself some pegboards from there. And then most of the add-ons that I have, again, is from IKEA. I actually bought a few other ones, like little hooks for my yarns on, I think it was Etsy. So you can get ones that are 3D printed, and you can kind of get them more customized, or things that you can't find in IKEA or other shops, you could always have a look on Etsy as well, because people like to make little add-ons on there. So that might be a great way to take advantage of storage if you have a lot of wall space as well. And I find that particularly helpful to pop it right near your desk if you do have that space. But one of my biggest tips when it comes to storage is trying to get a really nice organized system and labeling as much as possible. So breaking down the drawers or the shelves into different craft categories, or into different tools, or maybe into different yarns and cord sections. So categories can really help, and having nice storage systems that are clearly labelled are fantastic, because I find that one of the major things is when you have lots of different crafts or lots of different equipment, when you're just chucking them away into boxes and you're not labelling them up, you don't have a clue what you've got, how much you've got, and that is the quickest and easiest way to start overspending. When you think you may not have, let's say, particular yarn or cord, and then you go out and buy some more, and then you come back and you're rummaging around in all of your drawers or looking around on your shelves, and actually you've got loads already, and then you're just adding to it. So I really do find that if you can find a really nice storage system that works for you, and to categorize it as well, and labeling, a label maker is absolutely fantastic, so you know what's in those drawers, particularly the ones, like I said, with the cube storage unit. If you have drawers or cabinets, it's great to pop a little label just in the front of it, even if it's just one of those little sticky labels that you can pop on the front. It's great to then know what is actually in that drawer, so you're not going to be overspending and buying more crafts than you need to there. So that's a really key thing. And it might be one of those things that you have to spend a whole day on, maybe several days, depending on how many crafts and how much stuff you have got in your room there. But that was the great thing when I moved. I really had to sort through all of my storage, and it was really quite firm on myself to think about where I would store things, if there's anything that I don't need anymore that I can get rid of. And I was really trying to be a lot smarter with how I was storing things, and trying to be able to see what I've got more. I think making it more visually appealing and knowing what I've got in each shelf or in each drawer really does help. But it might also be a thing that it just evolves over time. The amount of times that I have rearranged this craft room is ridiculous. It's a little bit of an ongoing joke. The positioning of my desk space and my storage space, and what I'm storing in each of those shelves and dividers, has changed a lot over the last year. So it might evolve, you know, you might not be happy with it to start off with. And again, if you change up a craft, or you end up getting more equipment or more yarns, you might have to change it again, and you might have to add to it, or you might take away some stuff. So it's always a process, and it might chop and change there. But I would really recommend to have a really good sort out, a clean out, you know, earmark a day where you can go through things and then start labeling up all of your boxes. Get lots of maybe plastic storage boxes or little drawers and dividers, and then you can start categorizing things. And I find that is super useful. And it also clears your mind as well. There's nothing worse than having a really messy space and you don't know where anything goes, and you're just chucking everything together, and then when you want to use a particular tool, or when you want to find a particular cord, you then can't find it because it's just all jumbled up with everything else. So it really does help in the long run to have it nicely organised. Another very important thing is your chair, your office chair, your desk chair. So if you're doing a craft where you're sitting down for some time, you really need to think about that, because it's so important with your back and with your neck to make sure that you've got a really comfortable seat with a lot of support in it as well. So you might need to have a look at that. They aren't cheap a lot of the time, so it is a bit of investment, and it's something that is important. You don't want to just use any old chair for it, because if you're going to be spending hours sitting down, you really want that comfort and support. So for me, I've got a really nice chair where I've got a lot of lumbar support, and I've got little armrests as well as a headrest on the back there to make sure that I sit up nice and straight, because I have terrible posture and I get aches in my back and my shoulders. So it's really good to think about your office chair, and it is an investment to start off with, but it does really help in the long run when you're spending hours working on it. But it might be a case, like I said, with the desk, which you might have as a standing desk as well, so you can kind of flip in between the two. But an office chair is a really good thing to think hard about, because before, when I was living at the flat, I was working on a dining room chair, which really had absolutely no support, and it hurt my back to be sitting down and crafting and teaching for hours on end. So having my new desk chair, although it was expensive to start off with, it was a great investment. It kind of swivels around and it's given me a lot more support. So that's something that's really key, and unfortunately might be a little bit of a splurge to start off with. But again, you could take a look and see if places like Facebook Marketplace or something else might have a good office chair as well. So other things to think about that might not immediately come to mind are things like your power supply, if you need water for your crafts, your lighting, and even your sound. So I'll start with power. So obviously you may want power supplies depending on what you're doing. If you've got a sewing machine, or if you are with a small business teaching, or if you need to work on a computer for your small crafting business, you will need a power supply near your desk. So that's something to think about, because you don't want cables trailing everywhere. So it's trying to pop your desk either next to a power point, or if you do have the option to, if like me, you moved in, then you are doing the electrics anyway, it might be good to think about where you are putting your power supplies. Water, do you need somewhere to be able to wash up quite regularly? It's a lot more kind of niche there, but for some crafts it can be good to have a craft room with a sink, or with somewhere that you can wash your hands, or if you need water for your craft, that might be something. Because I know with particular crafts like paint pouring, you might not want to be running around your house with paint dripping everywhere, having to find the closest sink. So again, it's an expensive thing, but if that is a craft that you're going to be doing long term, you need to really think about if you need any kind of water unit in your craft room. Again, that's something a little bit more expensive and a little bit more niche, but it might be applicable to some of you who do want to do crafts that include water, or to be able to clean up without having to drip everything all over the house. Light sources, that might be something that gets overlooked, but that can be really crucial. So lighting, in terms of the actual lighting in your room, what do you need? Do you need a spotlight? Do you need a little table lamp? Do you need a ring light? Those are things that you really have to think about there. So with your specific craft, and if you are wanting to take photos, if you're doing a small business, you might want to have a little kind of photography area with a lighting system set up with that. So maybe some little studio lights or ring lights. And a lot of these things you can get really cheaply on Amazon now, but lighting is definitely something to think about, especially if you're crafting away in those winter months. You want a really good lighting system to be able to see what you're doing. And if you are taking lots of photos, or if you're filming for any of your crafts to sell, or if you're making any videos, you really want to make sure that you've got a great lighting setup. So that's something that gets overlooked a lot of the time, but I think lighting is a huge element of it. Not only artificial lighting, but also sunlight. Where are your windows in the room? That is a big thing there, because natural light can be really quite nice there for photography, but also in terms of if you are teaching like I do, where the light is coming through, you don't want it kind of blasting in your face in the middle of a session, or you don't want to be blasting it in your face if you're crafting away and you'll constantly have to draw your blinds or draw your curtains. So it might be a good idea to think about where your desk is in position to your light source. You might need it and find it quite useful. Other times it might be actually distracting or affecting your workspace as well. You might want to be able to look out a window. I find that I like to sometimes be able to look out the window. I find it really helps me get my creative juices flowing, to be able to look out in a little bit of nature there. So if you have a nice window with a nice view there, that might be something you want to think about. Where are you positioning your desk to be able to get the most out of your space and to be able to maybe see outside or use that natural light as well to your advantage? And another thing that gets overlooked is sound. So again, this is a little bit more niche, but if you are planning on filming crafting videos, or if you are teaching workshops, sound is a big thing that you need to think about. So you might want to think about soundproofing solutions, or if you have a door to kind of soundproof around the door there. Is your room quite echoey? That's things you might want to think about if you're doing anything related to video or workshops online. I know for myself that's something that I'll be looking at in the future. I want to try and soundproof this room quite a bit more because it can be quite echoey and you can hear quite clearly through the windows, and I can hear my dog pottering around. So it's something that I'm going to look at, soundproofing the doors a little bit more and maybe popping up some soundproofing around the walls in the room there to try and just get it less echoey and improve the sound quality of my videos and of this podcast as well. Another thing is actually the decorations or the background of your craft space. So you obviously want your room to look nice. You want to be able to feel very relaxed and to be able to get nice and creative with it. So think about the decorations in your room. Do you want to pop up shelves to be able to display your art? Are there frames, picture frames that you like to pop up of your art, or would you like to hang up your pieces? Like I've got my loom weaving hanging up on a wall there. That's definitely something to think about, and make it maybe cozy or clean, whatever it may be. It's quite nice to have some added decorations in there just to make it feel homely, but also at the same time give you that kind of creative space as well. Not only that, but again, if you are thinking of either teaching or if you're doing photography, it could be really nice to have a nice background as well. So for me, that's one of the key things. I really want to make sure that I have a nice background when I'm teaching. So I have tiny little shelving units that have some of the crafts that I've done. I pop little candles on, and I've got some nice frames hanging up in the background. So it's visually quite nice there for people to see when I'm teaching my workshops. But also in my photography, when I am taking photos of me working at my desk and crafting at my desk, it can be quite nice to have a nice clean space that's decorated with crafts that I've done or other artists, their work that I really love. So that might be something to think about, particularly if you're doing any photos, videos, or teaching, to really think about your background space. Does it look visually appealing? That can be overlooked a lot of the time. You don't really want a really kind of cramped area that looks super messy if you're taking photos or if you're teaching. So think about how it looks visually. And I find as well, if it looks good, it makes me feel good. I want to then spend more time crafting, and then it makes me feel like I can get more ideas flowing. So that's something that gets overlooked a lot, but I think it's really important to think about the background and the atmosphere and the cleanliness of your room as well. I know it can be hard. I am not the most organised and neatest crafter around. I like to dump stuff on the table there, but every now and then having a good clean out and making sure it's all decorated nicely can really, really help your mindset. But for fibre arts in particular, again, it is depending on what fibre art you're doing. But for me, as an example, since I specialise in macrame, loom weaving and needle felting, the biggest things for me in my craft room is the storage of my cords and yarns. So like I said, the X dividers in my cube storage units really help to be able to store all of my cords and yarns in a kind of colour coordinated system. You could use your pegboards to be able to hang up your yarns and your cords there. That can be quite nice. I've seen some beautiful photos of people who've done a lovely rainbow system of their cords and yarns all hooked up onto their pegboards. So that might be something to think about there. So all of the little equipment, my needle felt needles, all of my loom weaving accessories, all little bits and pieces of that, you will probably want to think about storage system for those. So maybe little stationary organisers can be quite good as they're a lot smaller, and you can separate those into different categories as well that you can pop on either on your desk or that you can pop onto a pegboard if you have one as well. That can be quite nice because that's a quick, easy place to be able to reach over and grab the tool that you need at the time for your crafting. So I find having a little storage system on your desk or on your pegboard can be really useful for things like keeping needles in one place or any of your loom weaving accessories as well in place. On the larger side of things, if you are doing macrame, a large scale macrame project, you might want to think about having a clothes rack of some sort so that you are able to hang up all of your cords onto the clothes rack to be able to stand up and work. Because I know when you are working with very long cords, the last thing you want to do a lot of the time is work on a table. It gets all tangled up in your lap. Obviously, for accessibility reasons, you might need to sit on a table, which is absolutely fine. But you might find certain people like to stand up. I like to stand up sometimes and work because if I'm working with long cords there, I like to use gravity to do its thing and help to keep my cords nice and untangled, and it can just flow nice and freely. So something like a clothes rack or anywhere that you can hook up your cords. S-hooks in macrame are fantastic. So if you have a clothes rack or even a curtain pole that you can pop your macrame cords onto, or even something like a little nail or hook in the wall, that can be quite useful to hook your macrame project onto to be able to work a little bit more vertically than you would be able to do on the table. So that might be something to think about there. If you're doing a large scale loom weaving project, where do you have space to pop your loom? How big is the loom? Do you have a tabletop loom? Is it a much larger freestanding loom? That's something that you need to think about in terms of your space there. And also how you would sit down or work with it as well. You want to be able to feel quite comfortable. So when you are doing your loom weaving, think about the size of your loom and where you would put that. Same goes for a sewing machine. How many sewing machines do you have? How big is your sewing machine? Where is there space on your desk for a sewing machine? Are you near a PowerPoint? So these might seem like really obvious things, but they get so easily overlooked, particularly things like power supplies, light, background, things like that. So it's really important to take a look if you're just starting out, or even if you want to refresh your space, taking a look at some of those elements and having a little rethink there, or maybe finding a better storage system or something like that might work for you. So hopefully you found that helpful with some of the tips there on the storage and your craft space. Feel free to let me know in the comments what storage system you really love and what's working for you. You can also let me know by joining my Patreon and have a little lovely community there going. So feel free to use that to let me know about your craft room, what space do you have and what shelving system really works for you. As I mentioned earlier, I'll be popping up photos of my old craft space and my storage system, and then my new craft space and my new storage system on my Not Weave Stitch blog on my website, and my website is giselamartin.com. On next week's episode, we'll be looking at macrame and how to get started in it. So thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you in the next one.